It was a typical day at Harvard Law School, where students were used to the intense pressure and sharp minds of their professors. But for Karoline, a brilliant yet humble student, this particular session would change her life. Professor John Miller, a seasoned educator with decades of experience, was known for his tough approach to teaching. He believed in pushing his students to their limits, often questioning their abilities in ways that could break the unprepared. However, when Karoline, a soft-spoken yet fiercely intelligent woman from a small town in New Hampshire, was called on in class, the professor's attempt to challenge her would soon backfire in ways he never expected. Unbeknownst to him, Karoline's sharp legal mind would not only withstand his scrutiny but also leave him awestruck by her unparalleled knowledge of the law. As the class settled into an uncomfortable silence, Karoline straightened up in her seat. Professor Miller had asked a complex question about a recent Supreme Court ruling, one that had stumped many of her peers. He seemed convinced that this would be her breaking point. "Ms. Leavitt," he called, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Care to enlighten the class with your thoughts on this matter?" The room fell even quieter. Most students braced themselves for what they expected would be an awkward pause. But Karoline didn't hesitate. She stood up slowly, her demeanor calm, but her eyes sharp with confidence. "Professor," she began, her voice steady, "the ruling you're referring to isn't just about precedent. It's about the underlying principles of justice and how they align with the Constitution's original intent. If we look deeper, it becomes clear that the court's decision is grounded in the idea of protecting individual liberties against overreach, which was something the framers were particularly concerned about." The room was silent. Karoline spoke with authority, referencing case law and legal theory in a way that left no room for doubt. Her understanding of the law was not only impressive but profound. Professor Miller, who had expected to see her stumble, found himself momentarily speechless. He had underestimated her, assuming her quiet nature meant she lacked the fire and intellectual rigor required for such discussions. But Karoline wasn't done. She followed up with a detailed analysis of the case, connecting it to broader legal trends and implications for future rulings. By the time she finished, the class was in awe. Professor Miller, who had been known for challenging students to the breaking point, was now the one taken aback. For the rest of the semester, Karoline Leavitt was no longer just another student in the class. She became known as the one who had not only outsmarted the toughest professor but had done so with grace and intellectual brilliance. What had begun as an attempt to humiliate her had only revealed the depth of her genius. Word of her remarkable performance spread quickly, and soon, professors and peers alike were seeking her out for her insights. Karoline had proven something far more important than her legal knowledge. She had shown that the greatest minds are often the most underestimated. And, in her case, that made all the difference. As the semester went on, Karoline's reputation continued to grow. Students who once ignored her were now asking for her opinions on assignments and readings. Even Professor Miller, who had initially tried to humble her, began to seek her insight on complex legal issues. But while Karoline's academic success was undeniable, she remained as grounded and humble as ever, never letting the attention distract her from her ultimate goal, to make a difference in the legal field. One afternoon, after a particularly intense lecture, Karoline was packing her things when Professor Miller approached her. He had a thoughtful expression on his face, which was rare for someone usually so confident in his own knowledge. "Karoline," he began, his tone more respectful than before, I've been thinking about our first interaction, and I owe you an apology. I misjudged you." Karoline raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I thought I was pushing you to learn more, to be better, but what I didn't realize was that you were already there, far beyond where I expected. You've proven to me, and to the entire class, that intellectual rigor isn't just about sharp retorts or showing off knowledge. It's about depth, insight, and the ability to connect dots that others can't even see." He paused, looking genuinely humbled. "You're one of the brightest legal minds I've ever encountered." Karoline nodded, accepting his apology with grace, but she could sense that there was more on his mind. "Thank you, Professor," she said, "but I've learned just as much from this class as I hope I've taught you. You've pushed me to think critically, to challenge the status quo, and for that I'm grateful." The professor smiled, a bit of pride breaking through his usually stern exterior. "I expect great things from you, Karoline. You may be young, but I have no doubt that you'll go far in this field." As she left the lecture hall that day, Karoline's thoughts lingered on the professor's words. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about proving the value of thinking outside the box, of challenging the assumptions that people, even seasoned professionals, made about her. It was clear that this was just the beginning of her journey. Weeks later, Karoline was selected to compete in one of the most prestigious national moot court competitions in the country. Her task: to argue a case that would be presented before some of the top legal minds in the country. It was an opportunity that many would dream of, but Karoline wasn't about to let it be just another checkbox on her academic resume. She knew that this was her chance to prove that the legal field needed fresh perspectives, and she was ready to bring hers to the table. The competition day arrived, and Karoline stood at the podium, poised and prepared. As she began her argument, she felt a sense of calm she had never experienced before. The years of hard work, the challenges, the moments of doubt, they all led her here to this very moment. And as she spoke, Karoline realized that the best way to truly change the world wasn't by following the established paths, but by forging a new one. And she was ready to do just that. A few weeks later, as the end of the semester approached, Karoline received an unexpected email from the dean's office. It was an invitation to a private meeting, one that, at first glance, seemed routine, until she saw the subject line, "Special Opportunity." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been expecting anything of the sort. Was this about her recent performance in class? Or perhaps a summer internship offer? The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. Karoline tried to push away the rising anxiety, reminding herself that she had handled tougher situations in the past. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. When she arrived at the dean's office, she was greeted by Dean Patterson, a figure she had only seen in passing, and Professor Miller, who was already seated across from him. The atmosphere felt oddly formal, and Karoline's nerves increased with each passing second. "Karoline, thank you for joining us," Dean Patterson began, his voice even but laced with a certain intensity. "You've caught the attention of several influential people within the legal community." Karoline blinked, unsure of where this was heading. Professor Miller leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "We've been discussing your recent work, Karoline. Your insights into constitutional law, particularly your analysis of the recent Supreme Court ruling, have impressed not only the faculty but also some alumni. There's an opportunity for you, something that could shape the trajectory of your career in ways you might not even realize. Karoline's confusion deepened. What kind of opportunity? The dean exchanged a glance with Miller before speaking again. We've been approached by a legal firm, one of the most prestigious in the country. They are offering a fellowship to a select student. The fellow will work directly with senior partners on high-profile cases, including constitutional law and civil liberties issues. This is a chance to get unparalleled experience. Karoline's pulse quickened. A fellowship like that could launch her career, but she had never considered something like this. She had been so focused on her studies, on proving herself in the classroom, that she hadn't thought much about the professional world outside Harvard's walls. There's a catch, though, Professor Miller added, his tone shifting slightly. The fellowship is highly competitive. Only one student will be chosen, and they'll have to demonstrate not just legal skill, but also resilience under pressure. The cases are intense, and the stakes are high. Karoline felt a weight settle over her. She wasn't sure whether to feel excited or overwhelmed. The thought of working alongside top-tier legal professionals was thrilling, but the pressure, could she handle it? And there's more, Dean Patterson continued, watching her closely. We've also been made aware that there are certain ethical challenges surrounding the firm's recent cases. This isn't just about proving your legal ability. It's about navigating moral boundaries that could test your values as a lawyer. Could be a defining moment in your career. The room fell silent. Karoline's mind raced. She had always been guided by a strong moral compass, but now she was being asked to consider whether she could compromise her principles for the sake of opportunity. Would she be able to stand firm in the face of potential ethical dilemmas? Professor Miller, sensing her hesitation, spoke again. This isn't an easy decision, Karoline, but it's a rare one. Not many get the chance to work with a firm like this, especially someone at your level. Dean Patterson added, we believe you have the potential to rise above these challenges, but ultimately the decision is yours. Karoline felt the weight of the moment. Her mind kept returning to the classroom debates, the late nights of studying, the pressure she had placed on herself to succeed. This was her chance to take everything she had learned and put it into practice on a grand scale. But it would come at a cost, one that wasn't just professional but deeply personal. I need some time to think, Karoline finally said, her voice quiet but firm. Both the dean and Professor Miller nodded in understanding. Of course, take the time you need. As Karoline left the office, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She had always believed that the law was about fairness, justice, and truth. But what if this opportunity came with compromises that challenged those very principles? Could she stand by her ideals in the face of immense professional pressure? The next few days were a blur. Karoline spent countless hours in the library, flipping through casebooks, rereading her notes, and reflecting on everything that had brought her to this point. The weight of the decision was immense, but in the quiet moments, when she allowed herself to be honest, Karoline knew that the path she chose would define not just her career, but who she was as a person. After days of internal struggle, Karoline knew that her decision could not be based solely on ambition or the promise of prestige. It had to be about something deeper, her values, her commitment to justice, and her belief that the law was meant to serve the people, not the powerful. The morning before the final decision was due, Karoline sat alone on the steps of the law school, her thoughts clearer than they had been in weeks. She thought about all the moments that had led her here. The challenge in Professor Miller's class, the sleepless nights spent combing through case law, the conversations with her friends and mentors that had pushed her to see the bigger picture. And now, the choice before her was a reflection of everything she had worked for and believed in. That afternoon, she returned to the dean's office. Dean Patterson and Professor Miller were waiting for her, the seriousness of the moment hanging in the air. "I've thought about it a lot," Karoline began, her voice steady but resolute. "I'm honored by the opportunity, but I have to decline the fellowship." There was a brief silence before the dean nodded, his face showing a flicker of respect. "We understand, Karoline. It's a difficult decision to make." Karoline continued, "I've realized that the law isn't just about making it to the top. It's about making a difference in a way that aligns with who you are. I can't, in good conscience, work for a firm that might force me to compromise my principles. I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity, no matter the opportunity." Professor Miller, who had watched her grow from a quiet student into a confident and thoughtful young woman, smiled warmly. "That's the true strength of a legal mind, Karoline. Not just in the knowledge you hold, but in the courage to stand by what you believe." Karoline felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had made the right decision, and while the road ahead would be filled with its own challenges, she was ready to face them on her terms. In the months that followed, Karoline's reputation only grew. Word spread about her decision, and many respected her for the strength of character it took to make such a difficult choice. She went on to work in a public interest law firm, advocating for civil rights and justice. And although she may not have chosen the traditional path to success, Karoline knew she was exactly where she needed to be. As for Professor Miller, he often told his students about Karoline's story, not as a tale of failure, but as a powerful reminder that the law at its core is not about winning at any cost, but about protecting what is right. And Karoline Leavitt, legal genius, became not just a force in the courtroom, but a beacon of integrity for those who followed in her footsteps.